not always competition, but a confirmation. Well, from Gabon, where coup leaders sought voter endorsement, to Guinea, emerging from years of military rule, and the Central African Republic, where constitutional changes have reshaped eligibility. Elections are increasingly being used to transform military or heavily centralized power into civilian authority. But at least on paper, it raises difficult but necessary questions. When does an election represent democratic recovery, and when does it simply repackage power? Are voters being given real choices or asked to legitimize outcomes already decided? And what does this trend mean for Africa's credibility at a time when governance standards increasingly shape global partnerships, investments, and diplomacy? Well, to unpack this, I'm joined by Prince Adetayo Adekunle. He is an African transitional justice expert, a lawyer, and a political analyst, and he is a member of the African Union Election Observation Mission to Guinea's December 2025 presidential election. Well, Prince Adekunle brings a rare blend of legal, political, and on-the-ground electoral insight, making this discussion timely and necessary. Prince Adekunle, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
All right. So let's draw from your work in transitional justice. Why are military-led governments across Africa increasingly turning to elections as a strategy for legitimacy?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. The truth of the matter is that the world has evolved to a place where unconstitutional change of government is no longer recognized. And even when they do happen, due to internal issues of that particular state, you'll notice that the government that is produced by such unconstitutional change usually gets a lot of flax in form of sanctions from multilateral organizations, principally the United Nations, the African Union, and in our own local context here, the ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. So as much as those leadership try to assert themselves, do some service delivery for the people, they still realize that they are unable to make appreciable progress due to the economic, political, and if you like, socioeconomic sanctions placed on them by these multilateral organizations and neighboring countries. So in that wise, they also see the need to transit into civil rule or if you like, democracy, so that they can enjoy the full benefits of statehood and state recognition. Because state recognition, as we know, is a political act. In fact, if a state is recognized at international law, but the leadership is not recognized, one could infer that the recognition of that state is limited. So all of these gentlemen in military uniforms and outfits tend to switch to a democratic rule, again, due to international pressure and for them to demonstrate some democratic credentials and for them to get legitimacy, because in most cases, legitimacy is usually derived from the ballot, especially when the mandate is freely given by the generality of the people.
Well, you were in Guinea in December to observe the just concluded election. Well, based on your AU observation role in Guinea, what stood out most about how elections are organized and in post-coup contexts?
As for my observation, the Yorubas have a proverb that says that no matter how skillful or smart a dog is, that dog can only secure a single house. As for me, I was posted to the Kaloum district of Conakry, which is the country's capital. And so my observation would only be limited to all of the 32 polling units that I personally supervised or observed the conduct of elections therein. From what I saw in all of the 32 polling units that I personally supervised, I witnessed massive turnout by the people of that country. I saw youths, women, and men in their large numbers turn out. Some of the things I also witnessed, which was surprising to me, was that some polling units were actually located or situated in the family compounds of some persons in Conakry. And when I asked questions, I was told that is the tradition there. So in the 32 polling units that I supervised, I saw substantial compliance with the electoral process. Although some of my colleagues who were posted out of the capital reported that that there were varying degrees of manipulation, though at a very, very negligible rate. So what I would say stand out the most was that the election management body, I could say they were very careful in the sense that the elections attracted international attention, such as our delegation from the African Union, as well as others from ECOWAS, the Manu River Union, and even from the European Union. So what we saw really, or let me say, what I saw really was in substantial compliance with the Guinean constitution, their electoral code, and the various international and supranational legal orders governing the conduct of elections.
Well, let's move now to Gabon. A coup leader won an election. Well, would you say it's a democratic reset or a sophisticated form of continuity?
Well, I think I would say that it's a sophisticated form of continuity because in my opening comments, I did say that legitimacy is majorly won, through the ballot. But there are other schools of thought in political science who hold that sometimes an unconstitutional government can earn legitimacy if it provides service delivery to the people in a way and manner that surpasses what civilian rulers who preceded him had provided to them. So in the case of Gabon, I would just say that yes, it was a sophisticated form of continuity, though there were skirmishes from there, as some of my friends who are there told me. But elections generally, particular from what I know about electoral law in Nigeria, for instance, is that you cannot really have 100% election totally free of inadequacies or systemic shortfalls.
Why
What
is
you
that?
look out for insubstantial
Yeah, why can't
because
we
it is
have
an human
elections without all these shuffles?
because it is an human process, and by the nature of our humanity, we are not totally free from making mistakes, even when there is no corruption in mind. We are humans and we can make mistakes in some cases. And even in the places where we call saner climes, there have been disputed elections. You will recall the case of Bush and Gore. You see, there are so many. If you look at the American electoral jurisprudence, you find some case laws there on disputed election. Even President Trump's second term election, which he lost to Joe Biden, was also heavily disputed in some respects. So that's to tell you that it is a bit of a difficulty to have 100/100 electoral process.
Now, let's move to Guinea, where you observed the December 2025 elections. And well, I have to ask,
Yes.
what signal suggested to you that it was a genuine transition, if it was, and what also raised red flags?
Well, for me, some of the red flags, I'll start with the red flags. Some of the red flags that I saw, let me say it's on what I would call the monetization of the process. The nomination form, the nomination fee was pegged at around, I think, about $500,000. And if you compare that amount with the per capita income of the average Guinean, you know that that is absolutely within reach, or out of reach rather, I beg your pardon. Now, the second point is that some members of the opposition also complained of their disqualification from participating in that election, though there were opposition members, but some opposition did complain that they were not given the level playing field to participate. Thirdly, was that after election had been concluded, I think around 5 or 6 p.m., suddenly the election management body directed an extension of voting by an hour. I mean, that period, collation, counting, sorting, and the entire collation process was meant to have commenced. But the polling officials told us that they had received directives from the election management body asking them, or if you like, mandating them to allow people to vote for an additional hour. For me, that amounts to changing a goalpost in the middle of a match, right? So those were some of the red flags that I saw. But for the positives, the turnout was quite impressive. The total population of Guinea is around 15 million. The registered voters is about 6.9 million, and the turnout was quite impressive. The interim reports filed by our own team, the AUEOM, basically gave a pass mark to the process. I've also seen the reports filed by our counterparts from ECOWAS, corroborating what the AU team had reported, because both of us addressed a joint press conference on the 30th of December, 2 days after the conduct of the election.
Okay, now let's move to the Central African Republic, where we have seen constitutional changes, changes to the constitution to allow certain things to continue, and now rules to allow continuity according to the government. Now, how common is this tactic across the African continent, and what does this say about term limits today?
Well, you see, one of the suggestions I made on the sidelines of my engagement in Guinea was to inform very, very senior members of the diplomatic corps that multilateral organizations cannot afford to be reactive in their interventions. And I say that with all sense of responsibility, because when you see people extending term limits, it is hard to find a direct, cogent, and positive statement from any of the multilateral organizations saying that, oh, Your Excellency, this is not good enough, in the light of the ethos of democracy. They just basically go to sleep, and for me, that, in my opinion, I don't want to use a strong, but for want of a better word, maybe are we together?
Yeah, I'm here. Go
So,
ahead.
changing time limits is a red flag. The multilateral organization should condemn it, because if the khaki boys now, quote and unquote, acting in defiance of the purported change of time limits, now decide to strike, you now see a flurry of statements from sub-region to international condemning such unconstitutional takeover. So I think we should look at the roots. Politicians in Africa should learn to play by the rules. Or like President Obasanjo said, maybe we should evolve our own indigenous form of democracy. It seems some of us are still, caught up with the past of monarchy, particularly absolute monarchy. And so when we latch onto power, we do not want to get out of there.
Okay, so let's move away from these issues and let's now talk about the dangers of normalizing these election takeovers. We've seen it happen in a couple of African countries. What would this mean in the long term when we start normalizing election takeovers that emerge from military rule?
You see, it is quite challenging that for for all it is worth, multilateral organizations cannot really, interfere directly in the domestic affairs of states, to a reasonable extent. What I would have wanted, the situation I would have wanted as an individual, is to say that all those who emerge through unconstitutional change of government or military takeovers should be prevented from contesting elections superintended over by them. Because it would amount, basically to being a judge in one's own case. And learned members of the community would know that nobody is allowed to be a judge in their own case. People would also know that he who pays the piper may dictate the tune. If a general who is the sitting head of state is contesting an election against a leader of the civil society, that field is not a level playing field. It's not balanced because he's got the instrumentalities of the state and the resources to drive a campaign. So even if that election is to be conducted by an angel as chairman of the election management body, it will be difficult for it to have any semblance of fairness whatsoever. So when elections are done after military takeovers, some have argued, and rightly so, that they seem to be legitimizing such takeovers indirectly, because some other persons may also want to try their luck and say, oh, if I'm able to hijack the machinery of government through the barrel of my gun, I may perhaps be rewarded with an 8-year mandate. So the signal it sends is more on the negative side than the positive.
Well, let's look at international participation into these electoral processes. Well, you had mentioned earlier that you were a member of the AU observation team. Well, we've noticed that international partners, they often recognize the elections very quickly. What should the global community be accessing beyond voter turnouts, like you mentioned, and also calm polling days?
Well, I must say that election observation is not limited to what happens on election day only. It includes preventive diplomacy, because before an election observation mission is deployed, there is in fact a pre-election assessment mission, which basically goes like the John the Baptist to ensure that all the right boxes are ticked. So election observation is not only about what happens on election day. It also includes assessing compliance with the relevant laws governing the process, right? So it is not as if the international organizations just or international partners, as we call them, just recognize the election from the declaration of results. No, what they do is that they release an interim report based on what they have seen on election day and the days preceding to it, in fact, including what they observed during the final round of campaigns across the country. But some few months later, they then release a comprehensive report where wholesale recommendations are made to the particular country where the election was conducted, and for the international community amongst themselves. Like I said, the international community is a little bit handicapped in the sense that it cannot directly interfere in the process. Your job as an observer is to observe and report, not to interfere with the process.
Okay, Mr. Adekunle, it's been very insightful having this conversation with you, but looking into 2026, where do you see the biggest risk and opportunities for democratic recovery in post-coup states across Africa?
Well, I would say that the risks include the entrenchment of military-backed dictators and further erosion of democratic norms. But there's always a silver lining, and that lies in sustained local and international pressure for genuine democratic transitions, strengthened regional mechanisms for protection of democracy and the mobilization of active citizenry and the civil society, all of them working together, pushing for accountability and reform.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Adekunle. We appreciate you. Well, election remains a powerful tool, but they are not neutral. As we've heard today, the ballot can either open political space or quietly consolidate power, depending on how transitions are managed, institutions strengthened, and citizens protected. Africa's challenge in 2026 is not simply holding elections, it's ensuring they restore trust, accountability, and civilian authority, rather than legitimizing force through procedure. Well, Prince Adetayo Adekunle, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experience with us on Global Digest. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you for coming. Well, still ahead on Global Digest, security forces are patrolling Venezuelan streets as the opposition leader says the new president cannot be trusted. Details are more to come after this break. Stay with us.
News on the go. ADBN is everywhere you are. Stay connected with us across all our social media and streaming platforms for exclusive news updates, captivating stories, and more. Join the ADBN community today via our various platforms. Anavo TV app, ADBN Channel 121, Niger TV app, ADBN TV, Linuxville TV app. To get the latest news straight to your phone, join our WhatsApp TV channel. Just search for ADBN TV and hit the follow button. Turn on your notification to stay updated and never miss any part of the experience. Stay in the conversation with us across social media handles. On X at ADBN TV, Instagram at ADBN TV, Facebook ADBN TV, YouTube ADBN TV. Keep visiting our website on www.adbntv.com. Watch us live anytime, anywhere. ADBN TV, a part of you.
Welcome back. And now to Venezuela, where fears are growing in the streets of the capital, Caracas, as security forces tighten their grip following President Nicolas Maduro's controversial hold on power. Reports from within the country suggest repression has not eased. Instead, it has become more intense. In Parterre, one of Caracas's largest and poorest neighborhoods, residents say armed men are now a daily sight. Across Caracas, dozens of military checkpoints have appeared almost overnight. Soldiers and armed police stops search residents, while foreign journalists are reportedly barred from entering the country. It's raising concerns about transparency and press freedom. The Union of Journalists and Media Workers say at least 16 journalists were detained on Monday morning. Although they were later released, media groups warn this sent a strong message of intimidation to reporters and citizens alike. Images shared by Venezuela's Interior Minister shows heavily armed police deployed across the city. In some photos, senior government official Diosdado Cabello is seen posing with security personnel holding automatic rifles. As the government insists these measures are for security, many citizens and rights groups say the heavy show of force is deepening the fear and silencing voices. For people on the streets of Caracas, daily life now comes with constant presence of guns and uniforms. Venezuela's long-running political crisis may be entering another critical phase. The country's main opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, says she is ready to return home after months in exile, insisting her movement is prepared to win a truly fair and free election. Well, mixed signals from the United States are raising fresh questions about what comes next. The 58-year-old Machado is an industrial engineer and a mother of 3. She fled Venezuela in October, reportedly in disguise, after facing pressure from the government of President Nicolas Maduro. Now speaking from abroad, she says the time has come for political change. in an interview with U.S. media, Machado praised President Trump, saying his actions weakened the grip of her longtime political rival, Nicolas Maduro. She insists the opposition is ready to lead Venezuela into a new era through democratic elections. According to Machado, the opposition already proved its strength in the 2024 vote, which she described as deeply flawed. Well, she claims her movement won by a landslide. Well, despite what she called fraudulent conditions. Well, she believes if elections are free and fair, the opposition could win more than 90% of the vote. Well, as Venezuela watches and waits, many citizens remain caught between hope and uncertainty. The coming months could determine whether the country finally moves forward to a peaceful democratic transition or remain locked in a political limbo. It's a dramatic turn of events that has shaken Latin America and is drawing global attention. Venezuela's former president, Nicolas Maduro, has appeared in a United States court after his stunning capture ordered by President Donald Trump. His wife, Celia Flores, who is also facing charges, entered a not guilty plea. The court has fixed the next hearing for the 17th of March. Outside the courthouse, emotions ran high. Dozens of protesters gathered, some shouting in support, others celebrating his arrest. For many Venezuelans watching from home or abroad, it's a painful and confusing moment, seeing a former leader who once commanded a nation now standing as a defendant. Inside the courtroom, Maduro listened through an interpreter as the judge outlined the charges against him. Prosecutors accuse him of running a cocaine trafficking network in collaboration with international drug cartels. The charges include narco-terrorism, conspiracy to import cocaine, and possession of machine guns and other destructive weapons. But Maduro has consistently denied these accusations. He claims the charges are politically motivated, saying the United States is targeting him as part of a broader plan to control Venezuela's vast oil resources. His lawyer, Barry Pollock, described Maduro's arrest as a military abduction and has warned the legal battle ahead could be long and complex. Away from the Venezuela fiasco, well, 5 years after one of the darkest days in American diplomacy, U.S. lawmakers are again raising alarm over the safety of elections and public institutions. Well, Democrats in the United States House of Representatives say the threats that led to the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol in January 2021 has not disappeared. On 6th of January 2021, thousands of supporters of then President Donald Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol in Washington. Their goal was to stop lawmakers from confirming the election victory of former President Joe Biden. The violence forced lawmakers to flee for their lives and left about 140 police officers injured. Now, 5 years later, House Democrats are holding an unofficial hearing to reflect on that day and to warn about what they describe as ongoing dangers to democracy and public safety. Because Democrats are currently the minority party in Congress, they cannot officially set hearings, but they say the forum is necessary to keep the public attention on election security and the rule of law. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries says the discussions will focus on protecting free and fair election. He also says lawmakers will examine President Trump's decision to pardon more than 1,500 people who were charged over the Capitol attack. A landmark trial has begun in the United States 2 years after a deadly school shooting in Texas that shocked the world. For the first time, a police officer who responded to the attack is standing trial. not for causing the tragedy, but for allegedly failing to act while the children and teachers were being killed. The shooting happened in 2022 at an elementary school in Texas, where 19 pupils and 2 teachers lost their lives. It remains one of the deadliest school attacks in U.S. history. Adrian Gonzalez, a 52-year-old officer with the school district police, was among the first responders at the scene. Prosecutors say instead of confronting the gunman, Gonzalez and hundreds of other officers waited for 77 minutes before